and become the perfect patsy.
Not only did we not have the cooperation of the federal government, but in fact, they were the enemy. And we had 12 assistant DAs, I believe, and maybe about 10 investigators. No agency, law enforcement agency was cooperating with us, even our own police department.
He called me and said, "You know about my situation, you know what I'm doing down here?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Would you come down and just take a look at us, at what we're doing down here?" And I said, "Sure." And I had a one-year lease for this place at Stanford University. I canceled it in 15 minutes.
Under Louisiana law, Jim Garrison could have indicted Shaw himself, but to assure the public he was protecting Clay Shaw's rights and his own office's procedures in case of appeal, Garrison brought Shaw before a grand jury. The grand jury heard the evidence and moved to indict.
He went through a grand jury, but I have to say it was a grand jury that he had in his pocket.
To further test his case and further protect Clay Shaw's rights, Jim Garrison then asked for a preliminary hearing before a three-judge panel. Shaw's defense tried to introduce the Warren Report as evidence. The judges refused, ruling the Warren Report hearsay.
Well, I'm the lawyer who tried to introduce it, and that is accurate.
Getting the indictment against Clay Shaw came quickly. Getting Clay Shaw to trial would take 2 years.
The news media's reaction to Garrison, I attributed to their feelings towards Shaw initially. But then it became directed in a very bitter fashion towards Garrison, as though there was something sinister about Jim Garrison, something dangerously sinister.
They think our efforts to objectify our witness are something sinister, when we just don't have time to fool with it. So we give lie detectors now to witnesses we think are lying.
From Washington came a surprising announcement from Attorney General Ramsey Clark, stating that Clay Shaw had already been cleared by the Justice Department of any involvement in the assassination. Since Shaw's name had not appeared in the Warren Report, some reporters asked why Shaw was investigated in the first place. An aide to Ramsey Clark said the Attorney General had been in error.
They had substantial data by that time because we had. Clay Shaw, for example, had been with the Central Intelligence Agency ever since he was with the Mississippi River Shipping Company.
Prior to the Shaw trial, Garrison got a boost in his case when attorney Dean Andrews was convicted of perjury for lying to a grand jury when he said Clay Shaw was not Clay Bertrand.
And that was a very important conviction, but that's never mentioned.
We got no help from the FBI or any records that we were trying to get, investigative records, which ordinarily we would have gotten. Got no help at all.
Garrison would have gladly stepped back and turned everything he had, including manpower, over to any legitimate federal authority that wanted to continue that investigation.
Declassified FBI documents reveal that Bill Alford was right. Columnist Jack Anderson, acting as a hostile liaison for the agency, came away from New Orleans convinced Garrison had a case, one which Garrison offered to the agency. The FBI declined. Columnist Jack Anderson, acting as a hostile liaison for the agency, came away from New Orleans convinced Garrison had a case, one which Garrison offered to the agency. The FBI declined.
In the preparation for the trial of Clay Shaw by the district attorney's office, was the feeling in the district attorney's office that the case would never get to trial anyway.
Either because of his death or for some other reason.
We had two men assigned to Jim around the clock when all these threats were coming, from morning till night.
We were a close family, and my mother made sure that even though they had policemen and they would bring us to school and all, it wasn't any scary situation or anything because we were a close family.
We used to kind of play with the
Joe.
police officer. He's more of a companion.
Yeah, it was great.
Than, you know, kind of a sign that something was wrong or we should be worried about something.
You know, it's just one of those things where you grow up that way. That's the way you think. It doesn't seem
that peculiar or different.
When you got bored playing with one of the other kids, they had this adult who was there, or so we thought, to entertain us, not to protect us.
One day, Mom decided, I guess, to get us all out of the house and said that we were going to go to the store because she was going to bake a cake. And on the way there, I guess in the rearview mirror, she picked up that an FBI car had picked her up, and so she kind of made it like a game. She was trying to lose them, but every corner we turned, they turned. It was like, lose them, Mom, lose them, but I don't think she ever did.
I'm not a person inclined to be unduly fearful, but if somebody is removed as I am from normally from the reach of people in the killing business, if I reached the point of where I was concerned about the possibility of that happening, you can just visualize the concern of people at a less protected level.
I was digging up some information, actually, for Jim Garrison and Penn Jones Jr. of Midlothian. I was digging up some information that they wanted, you know, in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I parked my car on the side of the street, and I went to get this information. And when I came back and cranked up my car, it blew up.
Former Dallas police officer Roger Craig was hospitalized for 2 months. He later purportedly committed suicide with a rifle.
I don't like to go into that because they have families and everything else, but we lost a few witnesses by physical reasons, just like Dallas did.
Anybody that would approach him, he would bring him on board. And he was one of our biggest security leaks in the office. Jim himself, you know, it's sad to say, without him knowing it.
One man, as I remarked recently to Mark Lane, had me wondering why he always carried such a large briefcase. And it was almost as big as a suitcase. And I realize now the reason he was carrying such a large briefcase was he could take home more of our documents every day.
We had people that was brought aboard that later on we found that they wasn't working for the interest of the investigation or for Jim. You know, and I'm talking about people that were giving our records away.
One member of the staff turned all of Garrison's files over to Clay Shaw's attorneys.
If they can't remove you, and they do assassinate in the United States, and they've been doing it for years, and I'm sure they still do, because there's no reason for them to change their policies. Now they've been continually successful. If they can't kill you, they concentrate on discreditation.
In June of 1967, NBC News broadcast a white paper attempting to discredit Jim Garrison's case and witnesses.
Can you say positively that the person you knew as Clay Bertrand is not the person you have seen as Clay Shaw?
Scout's honor, he is not.
In my conversations with Perry Russo, he has stated that his testimony against Clay Shaw may be a combination of truth, fantasy, and lies.
He was not investigating any facts. His only purpose was, and he stated it pointedly, he said, I'm going to take Garrison out of this. He says, you're going down with him. He said, if you want to go, he says, you go with him because he says, you're finished. He says, now there is a way out. And I said, what would that be? He said, you go over to Biloxi, Mississippi. He said, we have a motel over there. He says, you're to walk in the motel. Clay Shaw will be in there, and you're to walk out and state on television that you do not know Clay Shaw, you have never seen him, and that he was never...
Unbeknownst to NBC's investigative reporter, Walter Sheridan, Perry Russo had been pre-wired for sound by Jim Garrison to record their conversation.
You're to state that Oswald was never at Dave Ferry's apartment. And number 4 is you know nothing about any Kennedy plotters or any plot to kill the President of the United States. And I said, if I do that, what do you suppose would happen to me in New Orleans?
Perry Russo is an amazing witness. You have to remember that the defense and the federal government and anyone interested in destroying Jim Garrison's case had 2 years to work on Perry Raymond Russo.
So I said, I wouldn't be able to even live in New Orleans. He says, what state are you interested in living in? And I was caught off guard by this, and so I said, well, I said, I've always been interested in California. He said, what city? I said, I don't know. L.A. Los Angeles. I said it's always been the city of dreams.
They worked on one of our main witnesses, Perry Russo, offered him a job in an insurance company in California.
I didn't go to Biloxi because what Walter Sheridan was asking me to do was an absolute lie. Shaw was there, Ferry was there, Oswald was there. Garrison, subsequent to this, indicted him for tampering and obstructing justice. Of course, that indictment fell in federal court. He never went to trial.
They didn't want to just discredit Jim Garrison. They wanted him destroyed.
What's that? You say that you are an American citizen and you want to see the autopsy x-rays and you want to see these hundreds of documents that...
The Federal Communications Commission found the NBC white paper biased and ordered NBC to give Garrison a half hour to respond.
What's the matter with you? Can't you take the word of these honorable men who've looked into it for you?
As a result of an appearance by satirist Mort Sahl on The Tonight Show, Garrison was seen again on NBC.
So then he came out. He said, "What are you doing these days, Mort?" And Mort said, "I'm an investigator for Jim Garrison." "Oh, really?" I mean, he was floored, although he just heard that 2 hours before. And he said, "Yeah." And then he said, "We've uncovered a lot of interesting things. Johnny, why don't you ever have Jim Garrison as a guest on the show?" At that point, there was an ovation from the audience. And Johnny sort of quieted him down and said, "Well, I'd like to if they will allow me to do that."
Because Garrison was sometimes impatient or profane with the press, Mark Lane and Mort Sahl decided to rehearse him.
Mort and I will be Johnny Carson. We'll ask you the tough questions. And you just remain really calm. He said, "I can do that, Mark." I said, "Okay, fine. Is it true you got a mental discharge from the Air Force?" "Those fucking guys, that's the fucking question." He got up and started running around the room. I said, "Well, this is the problem, Jim." So we went over and over it. And then he felt he was prepared. We had a lot easier job preparing Jim than they had preparing Johnny. Jim won the day, and Jim got tremendous applause from the audience, obviously, and it was the first time that the American people heard that kind of an allegation made on network television.
On January 29, 1969, almost 2 years after his arrest, Clay Shaw went on trial for conspiracy in the killing of President John F. Kennedy.